So, you want to paint glowy stuff on your miniatures, but you're hesitant. You might think it's too advanced, it's too hard to pull off, and you'll just end up ruining your model. But there's a way around that. I can make painting OSL as easy and fast as Warhammer pre-order go sold out, and without using an airbrush. I'll be testing different kind of light source on different surfaces, trying to fix those mistakes that make the effect look like poo-poo. What is OSL? Object source lighting is a technique used to create the illusion that there is another object present that's emitting another source of light. Maybe they're just my only two neurons talking, but that sounds really complicated, doesn't it? Painting light on your models is the most difficult things that you can do. So double the trouble? No thank you. But you know what? We can work around that. This is what you really need to know. 1. The source of light has to be very bright. Imagine the light source being in the center of a circle. The more you move away from the light, the less bright it's gonna be. And there's the first very common mistakes I used to do myself that really ruins the effect. But let's talk about color first. You only need 3 colors in order to pull off this effect. With the technique we're just gonna pick a highlight and a shadow, and of course white, which is gonna be very important later. Alice from the future here. I forgot to tell you that's really important that you paint your minis before you do this effect. Just makes it a lot easier. Trust me. The gradient will be created by itself just by using 1 shadow color and 1 highlight color. That's it. It's that simple. And you know how I know that? Well, by wasting my time with intermediate steps that made no big significant difference. Yeah, you're welcome. But how the hell you achieve that smooth gradient without using an airbrush? What if I told you it's dry brushing? Dun, dun, dun. Before we dive in, a quick reminder, I'm trying to go full-time here on YouTube, so any support you might give this channel is deeply appreciated, from just subscribing, commenting, or just watch the video until the end, checking out the sponsor. Don't skip the sponsor, please. Okay, bye. Moving on. So I took my shadow color and I stippled it on where the light source is. Here in retrospect, I could have used a slightly darker orange, but as you see, the result is good, so it really doesn't matter. I would suggest you start with a slightly darker color. Getting a smooth gradient means getting rid of that dusty look that's typical of dry brush. And you only do that by using moisture, which some people are really afraid of. So what I'm doing, I'm basically applying a sort of a blob of paint and then using that roundness of the brush and that moisture on the brush to blend it out. In some parts you can see right now the color is gonna fade a little bit, but no worries because you can always reapply it. The important thing is you get rid of that ugly dusty look. Then it was time for my highlight color, and for the way I blended the previous layer, I decided to move a little bit the light source in the center because it made more sense. You kind of have to remember that you have to follow that circles rule for how light expands. Here I'm very sparingly with my highlight color. I mostly highlight the edges or the hedges of everything. I just try to blend in the center to have like a smooth gradient. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here, which is I don't have an actual light source here. I have a pretend light source. And the reason why I did this is because I wanted to practice the technique I saw in the artist Opus OSL DRYBRUSH video. They demonstrated the technique on a very flat piece of terrain. I think that video was useful. I liked the video. It's a very good video, don't get me wrong. But it did leave me a little bit frustrated, to be honest. Because when I tried it out on my own terrain, I encountered some issues that weren't addressed in the video. In reality, most of the terrain is not gonna be super flat. It's gonna have cones where your big dry brush won't quite actually fit. Plus, it doesn't really start painting the light source itself till like 27 minutes in. And I think it doesn't use a very beginner-friendly technique. Don't get me wrong, I love the video, I love what they do in general, but I feel like he left me some roadblocks to work on by myself. I don't like that. Roadblocks in painting can happen often, and they're quite frustrating to overcome. At the end of 2021, I was going through a very rough patch because I was breaking up with my former partner. I was actually getting dumped. And I was feeling really down and depressed, and I couldn't do anything, you know? That feeling impacted on my painting a lot. But then I was able to use painting as an anchor for my somewhat fragmented sense of self. And I was able to do that thanks to therapy. And that's why today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp, an affordable and the easiest way to get therapy independently from where you are in the world. Wait. Before you skip ahead or click off, there is so much more to this than the stereotypical stuff. That's gonna be so useful for your painting as well. There is a more practical side to therapy where you can learn new mental skill, how to get organized, how to set goals for yourself, and taking care of that pile of shame more efficiently. Get matched with a professional according to your needs. They will help you achieve your goals, whatever they are. And the best part is you can do it all in the comfort of your own home, whether it's phone call, video chat, or messaging. So go to betterhelp.com/ataraxia or choose Ataraxia Painting Studio during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. Let's try it out. Back to our roadblock. How did I move past it? How do we paint the light source without doing super fine detail work? Well, first thing first, we're gonna use a different size brush. Not only that, we're also gonna use a different motion with our brush. So for example, in this area here, my brush doesn't fit and barely even this small one fits, so I have to stipple on the paint. When we use a smaller brush, it's gonna be slightly more difficult to get the effect that we want, but this is just one of the limitations of this technique. You just gotta deal with that. In order to avoid the common mistakes I mentioned in the beginning of the video, in the second step where you're gonna apply your highlight color, you will need to focus only on the first two circles, because if that light intensity is too extended, it's gonna look weird. Realistically, the light is gonna disperse and it's mostly gonna hit just the edges. If you have trouble to understanding where light will hit, just let your brush do the work. Let the downstroke of the brush guide you. Just move around the piece of terrain itself so you can actually move downwards from the light source in the different direction, following those circles. There's another secret thing that's gonna help you push that glow effect without using that goopy, sticky, shitty fluo paint. But first, how do I get a good light source without having to do detail work or using the airbrush? Well, the answer is very simple. It's called whitewashing. Have you heard of it? Well, you shouldn't, because I made it up. Now it's gonna change shape. Okay, so let me show you the technique real quick, and then I'll show you the dilution. Basically, we're thinning down our white so that it can run in the recesses. You can test this thing on your finger, on the model itself. Doesn't have to be precise, doesn't have to be clean or anything. It can be sloppy. I tried this with oils as well, thinking that might have been a difference in the strength of the pigment and stuff like that, but it's the same. I am also hitting a little bit the edges with that. So basically you're just applying a wash, making this wash spill outside the light source, and also do some sloppy edge highlights. You can reinforce that white by applying as many white washes as you want. That's pretty simple. Well, let me show you the dilution in depth so you maybe can understand. I'll put in a drop of white. I'm gonna take 1, 2, and 3. It's gonna be very thin down. This wasn't enough. I added more because then I test my consistency on my finger. You want this paint to run in the recesses of your finger. I think it's pretty hard to see because it's white, but basically it's this. You don't want it. You want a transparency. Now what? You're left with that bird poop on your light source. How do you actually make it into something that glows? Contrast paints. And sure, spraying it with an airbrush would make the effect look even better and cleaner, but many people don't have an airbrush. Contrast paints are a very good solution. And there is also another thing that will help you to take full advantage of the contrast paint's properties.
Here I added a couple of brushfuls of this ink to my contrast paint so I can retain those contrasting properties, especially if I'm painting like flat surfaces. And these are really powerful. You don't 100% need them to pull the effect off.
Use pure and not just diluted with contrast paint. It's gonna allow you to push the effect with zero effort.
An optional step, especially here on terrain, is gonna be reinforcing those white highlights. This is easy because you're just gonna highlight the edges using the back of the brush, so no skill required, no steady hand required. And once that dry, you're gonna go back with your glaze contrast paint thing, and it's gonna get real glowy real quickly.
I think I demonstrated how easy it is to get a glowing effect using a quite unconventional mix of techniques. But what about small surface, Alice? I tried using DRYBRUSH, but this area was way too small to take advantage of the brownness of the brush. I found myself with the same problem I mentioned at the beginning. Light effect was too extended. It didn't look natural. It just looked poop. So I tried a different path, trying to adapt the whitewashing technique to smaller surfaces.
I'm gonna use the whitewashing technique, and I started like this. Can you spot the mistake I made? Okay. You'll get it later. I start applying the wash into the plasma coil. Here it's just easier to figure out the consistency because you just let it flow outside the borders and let it flow into the recesses. Simple as that. Just remember, especially in those small models, paint it before you do any kind of effect. And here my mistake was doing a magenta effect on a red gun, which was a mistake. And I decided to just change the color of the gun because I like the contrast of the magenta and the green. And I'm just applying my 2 contrast paint, imbued it with the powerful of inks, and that's gonna make it glow a lot. At some point, I'm gonna go back in with the white to reinforce the effect, maybe reinforce a little bit those edges that I painted. These are not 100% necessary, but the important thing is that you don't extend too much the effect, that you reinforce that white. If you want, you might base coat the actual plasma coil if you don't want T-Rex to have that awful bad slap chop effect, but I think here is almost not needed, and I didn't do it and I was fine, so there you go.
And here's the big reveal.
Oh look! It looks pretty cool, right? And sure, it's not perfect in any way, and I think this is a very good way to get acquainted with the different dilution of paint without being super overwhelmed by it. And if you notice, for most part of the video I use DRYBRUSH. It's not the regular kind of dusty DRYBRUSH. What is it then? So if you want to have a nice looking glow effect and taking advantage fully of this video's knowledge, watch this video.